Hello out there, and already in 2019, guys, we have had a number of very cool new releases that have sort of set the pace for the year, starting with stuff like the large Polar from CRKT, and then last week we had the Spyderco Smock come out after a very long delay, and another knife, one that's in front of you right now, was also pushed back from 2018, and this one is called the Belone, and it is from Viper, also designed by Jesper Voxnaes, and it is one that I have been looking forward to since the first time I saw it at Blade Show all the way back in June. And the first time I saw it, it was almost like love at first sight. I knew that I had to have this knife. Very rarely, even though I am a knife guy and I'm attracted to a number of different kinds of styles and designs, very rarely does one jump out at me like this. And yeah, I mean, the hype train, at least in my head, the expectation and hope for this knife is really on a level that very rarely I've ever seen. You know, this kind of expectation is limited to like Star Wars movies and maybe like the first Chris Reeve that I got, this little Nkosi here. But what I'm happy to say is, even though this is not a perfect knife, it's definitely so far meeting my expectations, and that is a very, very good thing. So today we're going to talk about some of the details. Definitely going to be doing a full-length kind of review in the future with a lot more depth and details, but for now we're going to go through the specs and some of the size comparisons and a couple knives that I think this would really relate to well for someone who's interested in getting it. All right, and let's just start with the first one of those. And the first knife that I think of is the Benchmade 940, or in my case the 943. As far as size comparison goes, this is nearly identical. If you take a look at these with them lined up, the length is pretty much spot on. The blade length right around a little under 3.5 inches of cutting edge for both of these knives. And the weight is also very comparable too, even though we do have different materials. So the Benchmade has, the aluminum scales and very thin nested liners for the axis lock, comes in right at 2.8 ounces. Here, the Viper with the titanium liners and the carbon fiber scales coming in at 2.85, 2.86, so almost identical there. I will go through a number of other size comparisons as well, but I do want to say the other knife that I really think of when I'm thinking about a comparison is the Massdrop Dogtooth. And I actually did a little poll on the channel that you might have seen, which video should I post first? Should I do a first look video, an overview of this, or should I post the 10 things to know video that I filmed the other day about the Dogtooth? That one is still being edited. You are going to be seeing this one first, but I wish I could have had those two knives next to each other. The Dogtooth is actually on its way to the next reviewer in the pass around, but they're very, very similar, and so I highly recommend if you watch this video and you have interest, watch the Dogtooth, which I will post next. Watch that video as well, because where this knife sort of falters, the Dogtooth seems to excel, and vice versa as well. The things about the Dogtooth that I wish were a little bit better, this knife does excellently. So just very interesting there. All right. Getting into, though, some other size comparisons, what else we have on the table? We have a Kershaw bare knuckle. You can see that. Here is the large Polar. So not so large next to the Viper, that's for sure. The ZT 0393. And just for my buddy, the Lawn Ranger, because he will be disappointed if it's not here, the Paramilitary 2. Which is also a pretty decent size comparison, at least in length. All right, but getting back to the specifics of this Belone, very cool blade shape. I think aesthetically, this knife is off the charts, and that's really where it calls to me. The materials, the execution, all done pretty well too, but just the look of it and the design is top notch. And what we have here is this blade of M390 steel, flat grind, and it's just got this unique looking belly because it's thin, but just has that very distinct curvature and comes to a very acute tip as well. Other details about the blade, we do have a small sharpening choil. It's a little bit unique compared to most of the choils that I see. Most of them are rounded or curved, and this seems to be like triangular. So pretty neat and different there. The biggest win on this blade, though, all comes at the spine. Despite how good looking the belly is, and I mean it's awesome, but the execution, that excellence, is all on the spine. The spine is nicely rounded, which is very cool, but then you see where the jimping is, and that is an intentional thing for functional use. And so often you'll see jimping on a knife and it'll be throwaway, or it'll be good, but it might be in a spot that doesn't seem to be practical for the way you're going to use it. And this knife, I mean, when you get the knife in your hand, like, this is where your thumb's going. You can definitely use the knife like this, and it's going to be comfortable, and you actually aren't going to be sliding around. It feels nice and snug here, but when you're actually going to be using the knife, you know, consistently and heavy, I think that this is going to be the natural way that you'll be choking up, right where that jimping is. Or you might choke up even further, and again, be right where that jimping is. So just an excellent job, you know, making the jimping in a place that is going to help ergonomically, you know, make sense with the way that you're going to cut using the tool. So very good there. And then as we move on back, we have a carbon fiber scale with titanium liners. There are a number of different configurations with this knife. The one that you'll see in most pictures, and I'll slide them in right now, is a titanium scale with a titanium liner as well. And there are some plain ones. There's blue, there's bronze, there's the carbon fiber also with bronze. So just a number of different choices. I went with the carbon fiber because I knew if I didn't, no matter how much I liked the other one, I would regret not getting the CF. The CF on this is, it's pretty good. I really like the feel of it. It's similar to the scale of the Polar here, which was actually a pretty decent piece of carbon fiber in my estimation. It isn't too glossy, so it isn't slick. It isn't high traction, but with the ergonomics that we have here, it doesn't really need to be, because ergonomically this knife is about as good as I could imagine a knife ever being. The jimping certainly adds to that, but just the overall design, it just fits in your hand almost perfectly. And one of the things I really like is just the multiple configurations that just make sense. So this choil right here for your forefinger and choking up and cutting, or going back if you need to, but choking up and cutting like this makes perfect sense. And then if you are going to come forward, your middle finger goes right into that choil and it is perfect. I mean, this actually might be the most comfortable configuration for me. And you can see the extra real estate in this configuration. So if you do have larger hands, you'll probably be able to find, you know, some good purchase on this knife as well. The pocket clip, as far as ergonomics go, it has zero impact. You can't even really feel that it's there. So it isn't sharp in any way. And while the pocket clip does have some opportunities that we'll get to in just a bit, it certainly is not going to be providing any type of hotspot. So very good with that. And then as we move all the way to the back, we do have, I think these are just for show. Sometimes, you know, there's like milling or like speed holes or something in certain areas, and it actually has a functional purpose. I think these are just for show. It doesn't take away from the knife at all, though. You can see, actually, you can see probably as the light hits it. See this spot right here? Definitely something to be aware of. The titanium is going to be like any other titanium, and it will get snail trails. And I mean, I'm carrying this knife. I'm going to use it. I've set it down. I've rubbed against something. I mean, this kind of thing is going to happen. So if you get the all titanium scale one, be aware, you know, that's the kind of thing that happens, especially when you have the anodized color. Yeah, it will wear on you. All right, we do have a backspacer, relatively open frame though, so really easy to get in there and clean. We'll get back to lockup in a minute. Here's the knife in the closed position, if you're interested in that. So closed position right around 4.5 inches. So another quick size comparison. Here's the Kershaw leak closed. Next to it. And a bare knuckle closed. Some people are always asking me, what's the knife look like closed? Do some closed comparisons. Okay, so there's one. The clip, though, is an interesting point. The clip is a very deep carry clip. It is reversible. One oddity maybe about the knife is that everything uses torque screws except for this right here. It's just a regular like hex bit that takes this out. So no worries, it's easily reversible. I was able to take it out and put it back in. When we do talk about the clip, though, this is one of the big opportunities with the knife. It isn't a bad clip in terms of the way that it carries. The deepness of it is fine, but it isn't easy to get in and out of a pocket. And, you know, I'll show you a picture of how it looks. But the problem that I had is, if you see right here where the screw is, if you're trying to push it into a pair of pants, even slacks, which those kind of pockets are pretty easy to manipulate, it is going to get caught a little bit. At least that's my experience so far, because there just is zero space there. So you have to give it that extra push to get it down and like lock it in all the way down at the base here. So might be a little bit of a pain going in and out of the pocket, but for me, I don't know, it's a sort of a minor kind of gripe. But anyway, moving on, let's talk about some of the other big issues, the highest point of the knife, and I think possibly the lowest point. The highest point is the action. The detent on this knife is extremely dialed in. It is next to impossible to open this knife with the flipper without getting it all the way. It flies. And that is such an authoritative sound. When you open this knife, it is so snappy and strong. It feels like there's a spring behind it. So it's really impressive. And like I said, it's very authoritative. It might come off as aggressive, but one cool thing about the knife is that because of that big choil that we had, you can actually, you know, if you take your middle finger and your thumb, you can pop it open and slow roll it. So that works. It's actually pretty easy to do. And I really like having multiple ways of opening a knife. You know, that's one of my qualms with just flipper only kind of knives, is that if you're not able to do any kind of other opening, I don't know, I just like having those multiple options. You can see how high the flipper is here. So it does make it really easy to actuate. It is stiff because the detent is strong. And so you might get a little bit of, might get a little bit of wear on your fingers just from fidgeting with it, if that's what you're going to do. A little bit sharp on the jimping here, but not really a big deal. One thing that people might think is a big deal is the lockup. So the lockup up and down, left and right is without a flaw at all. It's perfect, but there is a little bit of stick. So it's something that's broken in since I've gotten the knife. I've done zero to adjust this knife in any way, shape, or form so far. So I'm just sort of letting it play out and just seeing how I like the knife as it is. And eventually, you know, I might go in, add some like lubrication and that kind of thing. But yeah, the knife, you can hear it just sort of pops. It's not sticking to the extent that it's difficult to disengage for that reason. I mean, it is a very strong lockup and the titanium is very hard, so I mean, you do have to give it a good push, but you hear that engagement. And it's easy to do like that, but just, you know, when you're in the flow of motion, it's not, you know, always easy to disengage unless you're focused on pushing it exactly the right way. Now, whenever I have lock stick, I'm always very concerned about stuff because I don't want to overextend the lock bar and screw up the knife. That's usually on like a frame lock. With a liner lock like this, that's not going to happen. You know, you have the liner and the carbon fiber scale. So, I mean, even if you push too hard to disengage it, it's only going to go so far and you're not really going to have to worry about that. Are there long-term ramifications for stuff like this? Potentially, sure, but I'm not able to tell you what they are quite yet because I've had the knife for about 2 days. So again, certainly will be part of the follow-up and the full review about how this breaks in and what measures I take to make the knife better. As far as the closing of the knife, which is always a big thing, it does not drop shut. There's very little friction. I think that it could be made to drop shut with lubrication and maybe just adjusting some things, but I'm not really worried about that at this point. I'm pretty happy with the way it just fires out. It is on bearings, so maybe you heard that one, just a loud pop. And yeah, the centering is pretty excellent. And overall, it's a knife that I'm pretty darn happy with, guys. Certainly, this thing right here is going to be a deal breaker for a lot of people, especially at the price point that we have, where I think these go from like $160 to $180. They're expensive, but as far as the design goes, that sort of trumps a lot of other things. Just the fact that it is a great looking knife, and for the most part is executed very well. Small flaws and things that don't really affect the way the knife functions, I'm going to overlook just because I like this knife and I want to like this knife. And while I am being as objective as I can, I mean, certainly my preference and the things that appeal to me are going to drive my opinion, and this knife really appeals to me. So there we have it, guys. Definitely, like I said, if you are interested in seeing like the inverse of this, check out the Mastrop Dogtooth 10 Things to Know About video, which will be coming soon, because I'm telling you, it has like a titanium liner lock just like this, a 0 lock stick. The action isn't as good as this one though, so I mean, seriously, every place that this knife could be better, that knife is great, and vice versa. So just interesting. But any other questions, comments, complaints, suggestions, as always, let me know down below, guys. Really appreciate you watching. Let me know your thoughts on this one, and I will talk with you soon. Have a good one.